Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. It is now 12 p.m., and I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar, Single-Use Technologies, Unanswered Questions. My name is Aaron Hubble, and I am the co-chair of ISPE Boston's Educational Programs Committee, and I'm excited to facilitate today's discussion on single-use. Before we get started, I'm just going to go through a few housekeeping items. First off, I'd like to thank our program sponsors, DPS, ICQ Consultants, and Massey Bioservices. Next, some information on how to participate in today's event. You will have the opportunity to submit your questions by typing your questions into the Q&A session on Pigeonhole. A link to the Pigeonhole Q&A platform has been provided in your confirmation email and will also be listed in the chat box. You may send your questions at any time during the presentation, and you can also upvote questions that others have submitted. As you follow that link, you'll notice that a few questions have already been asked in the platform. We'll collect these questions and address them at the end of today's presentation. On behalf of the Educational Programs Committee, I'd like to invite all of you to get involved with the chapter by volunteering with our committee. We meet the first Wednesday of every month at 5:30 p.m. over Zoom. We discuss and plan out the topics and speakers for our monthly educational webinars. We would love to have some fresh perspectives, and liaising with speakers and industry experts is a great way to expand your professional network. We really hope you'll consider joining, and I hope to see some of you next month at our meeting. Lastly, we hope you'll continue the conversation today on the chapter's social media platforms listed here. Now, I would like to welcome and introduce you to our speaker, Alejandro Kaiser. Alejandro is a process engineer with CRB. His expertise lies in the design of biopharma facilities, including upstream and downstream processes, project coordination, and project management activities and fieldwork. He is passionate about developing effective and efficient solutions for clients. He is continuously seeking new ways to do things better by looking beyond the status quo to new technologies and new methodologies that will increase efficiencies in facility design, operational flexibility, utility costs reduction, and reduced changeover time. His ability to think and act as a dynamic problem solver by incorporating new ideas has made him a valuable contributor to numerous concept design, basic design, and detailed design projects throughout his tenure at CRB for clients such as Pfizer, Lonza, Roche, B. Braun, Teva, Genzyme, BSF, just to name a few. I'm sure there are many others. Alejandro has a master's in chemical engineering from Washington University, as well as a Bachelor of Science in Chemical Engineering and a Bachelor of Art in Chemistry from Washington University. Alejandro is an ISPE member, but also Six Sigma Green Belt certified, a member of the American Society of Mechanical Engineers as a BPE active collaborator, and a member of the Occupational Safety and Health Administration. And with that, please join me in welcoming Alejandro Kaiser. Over to you, Alejandro.
Hi guys, you guys see my screen?
Screen looks good.
Beautiful.
Just put it into presentation mode.
There you go.
All right.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Alejandro Kaiser, and as Erin was saying, I'm presenting today about single-use technologies and answer questions. And today's presentation, the topics are going to be a little bit of introduction, and the main three topics are going to talk about supply chain robustness, the open source on single-use components, as well as sustainability on the single-use industry, especially on solid waste. So as a tiny introduction, I mean, Erin already did it. I have to do nothing there. Really, the main goal of this presentation in my mind is really to share the good and the bad and the ugly on single-use, and share any concerns that I've encountered and potential solutions that I've also encountered. And it really is, it's like an open discussion on ideas on how to move forward on this exciting new time on single use. And as a disclaimer, I wanted to say in this presentation, I really have no partnership or investment in any company that I would mention. And it really is not my intention to recommend any specific vendor or anything. It's purely just informative and not trying even to pontificate or be dogmatic, just really raising issues and brainstorm together on how to move forward. Okay. Now the obligated marketing slide. CRB, who are we? Well, very quickly, we're in the 80s, established, over 1,000 employees, less than $1 billion revenue a year, and 20 locations, and they pop like mushrooms. So every year you find one or two new ones. So just be on the watch for that. In the US, Europe, Canada, pretty much everywhere. Okay. So first topic, supply chain robustness. So what has happened here in the past 2 decades or so, there's been a complete mind shift between stainless steel and single use. We went from having absolutely everything in 100% stainless steel to roughly right now, we are a percentage of 85% single use facilities, not 100% single use, but a very considerable amount of it. And so here the question is, why did this happen? Why did this change come? Well, mainly it came, at least in my mind, to completely avoid CAP and SAP, because CAP and SAP is not just a time burden, having to spend several hours on each of the activities. Sometimes CAP can be 4 hours, and SAP, depending on how many pathways you have, a lot of hours in there involved as well. But it's also the capital investment on buying the skids, as well as the routing for all the supplies and returns, as well as the operational expenditure on the different liquids and gases that you're employing on that, as well as the validation of the systems, and failures. Failures can be, if the CAP return doesn't come as expected, or if RTD follows below 121, any of those things. So there is a lot of things that you save when you don't have to do CAP and SAP. And right now, facilities being built in stainless steel, there are some, of course, I mean, still a lot, but they tend to be a smaller scale. I built one in Germany 2-3 years ago. That was 15K bioreactors. I really believe it's going to be the last one that we'll see in the biotech industry, that size. So why did we do this single use from stainless steel? Well, one perfect example are bioreactors. Bioreactors are full of tethers everywhere, the sparger, and they make it really hard to CAP and to SAP due to the different pathways and different sizes, IDs to be clean. They have spargers, the baffles. Sometimes you potentially can have lips on the outlet valve, deep tubes. If you have a fermenter, it has internal coils for heating. All that makes it very difficult. So in that case, you completely remove all that concern when you go to single use. One example that I like are ingots that you typically see them in the pro belts. That picture of the ingot that you see in there is actually after CIP of one facility that we inspected. And ingots are really an art to get properly. You cannot do the hole too large or too small. It has to be exactly perfect, and you check it on FAT with a calibrated plug. Otherwise, you'll get contamination, and you have the double O-ring. If you don't change that O-ring in a timely manner, you might have between the two double O-rings, you might get contamination there hidden that you never realize. So all those things you wipe out. Now, as another example, in transfer lines, well, what is your gain really of a transfer line being single use versus stainless? Well, honestly, in my mind, there is not that much of a gain in the sense of CIP and SAP is not that bad of a deal. It's not, the same problems are not in here. It's a straight line, a straight shot. Is quick CIP, is quick SAP. And then now with new SAP standards on SAP and on RTD self-calibration and dead legs, actually new standard coming up, it's even easier. So we solved a problem, and then the irony is that we went full single use, solving some problems, but also creating other ones. So what is the upside really that you get with single use? Well, it is tremendous. I was explaining before, the time that you get to get you to market is much faster because you don't have to build these tedious stainless steel systems. Then the higher turnaround on equipment, and no CAP and SIP require. Hence also lower production cost because of the CAP and SIP. Tons of flexibility, especially for CDMOs or new products coming into your pipeline. And then of course cross-contamination is you can potentially reduce it to nothing. You can have two products running at the same time in the same suite that since it's intrinsically closed, as long as you maintain closeness, you really reduce it. And it's environmentally friendlier. You don't contaminate as much since you don't spend that much energy cleaning. Now, does that mean we are in Shangri-La? Well, yeah, it's great, and the industry is going towards that, and it's phenomenal. But there's also some things that we need to take care of and pay attention to. So where is the poop? Well, there are several items here, and we've all seen them sometimes. The leachables, extractables, particulates that are created when, for instance, you're doing pumping, and the gas permeability, biocompatibility, disposable failures. So all those things can deeply affect your product. And you need to do a lot of testing for those, for the doing aggressive solvent testing to see if there is any extracting material coming out, or checking your pumps for particulates, or if there is any toxicological effects or drug efficacy that is affected due to this single use. So there's things that we need to, things that we never had to worry with stainless steel, and they all come into play now. So those are to be taken into account. So what are 2020 has been a very special year for everyone, not always in a good way, and it's been in a way a nightmare for single use. Many things have happened. There's been global political tension, especially between the US and China, that has made a physical stimulus of companies actually to relocate back into the US, as well as COVID came in all of a sudden. And we realized that we have relied our manufacturing in other countries for absolutely everything, and then we don't have the capacity to manufacture it here and get it in a timely manner. So all that really elongated lead times. And then there was this nice idea of Operation Warp Speed of, okay, well, in what is really important right now, let's expedite that. And it sounded all phenomenal, saying, okay, well, I'm getting first on the line to get my products, my single-use tubings and whatnot on the line. But guess what? After a few months on this, everybody had an OWS letter. So we went back to square one and no really expeditation. So there's been a huge bottleneck on single use this year. Thermoplastic elastomers like C-Flex or so, those are in low times warehouse levels. It's very hard to get one. Bag holders, 28 weeks lead time, the disposable, I mean. Mixing bags, 38 weeks. And my favorite, RTU vials, 72 weeks to get your hands on one of them. So how can you really plan manufacturing with these awful lead times, right? And it's been a tremendous problem for everyone. As a side note, I'll say Sartorius, they gave last year a coronavirus bonus. They call it coronavirus bonus, by the way, to their employees, $10 million euros, to just say thank you for all the extreme effort they've been putting to try to push down the pipeline as many tubing and single-use tubing as possible. So it is a problem. So the funny thing here is that single-use was the solution for the long lead times that we were seeing with the stainless steel equipment. So we had a solution for hardware, and now we created a problem with disposables. So the suppliers, what is the problem here? Well, sadly enough, you get 2-3 times longer lead time on getting all these tubing sets than you get with the hardware. And one of the reasons is the warehouses, they have the business projections for around 3 years, and they decide, well, how many I'm going to sell of XYZ in these next years? Do I need enough capacity to hold that in the warehouse? But there is very limited wiggle room of what if there is an increased demand. And here we have COVID, and it was more than a little bit of increased demand. So that completely destroyed every projection. So something needs to be done with that. I call it the Black Friday philosophy, probably that should be implemented in a way where The problem is you don't want to over create those tube sets and throw them away. That's not good for business. But reality is you're always going to sell them because your demand is constant. The guy that bought your TFF tube set is going to buy it again and again. So it might take a little bit longer to sell it. So the upside is you don't get emptied out in the warehouse. The downside is that you might have a little remnant, and the little remnant, some companies what they are doing is, well, okay, I cannot give you 2 year shelf life, but what I will do is I'll sell it at a discount. So that's, and some companies are already implementing that. And then the other thing is some of the end users, even if they have a full single use facility, they are still going with chrome and TFF skids being stainless steel. And the reason, well, A, because it's kind of costly, those tube sets, but also because they cannot rely on not having the tube set available for them to production. That's not, they cannot afford that, of course not. So every big player, or a lot of the big players this year, Q1 actually, they are expanding capacity on their warehouse as well as on their production for single use, because the demand that came last year is here to stay. A little bit upper or lower, but it's here to stay. We're not going back to 2019 on that. So, and then on the end user side of business, there is also a need of having enough warehouse space. I call it like the 21 blackjack dilemma. If you need to get to 21. If you pass, you lose. If you don't reach, the one that reaches wins, right? So what happens here is bad if you don't have enough space. It's also bad if you are completely stacking up much more than you need and then having to throw it away due to the shelf life. So there needs to be a sweet spot where the warehouse is designed big enough to have all the capability. And there's always also a struggle between warehouse and production area. It's a battle of, because a lot of facilities are landlocked and you have only your land in there, and what do you use it for, warehousing or production, right? So that's a struggle in there too. And one of the things I want to show later on the presentation is, okay, how can you be more efficient with your warehouse space, right? So as an open issues, one of them would be, there's been supplier mergers and acquisitions right and left. Everybody's getting on bed with everyone. So then the problem comes, how, as an end user, okay, you just got bought out by somebody, but I have my contract at my disposal with you. Will I still get them? Oh, wait, and you divested from this particular item and had to sell it to somebody else. So, and that is a real concern on the end user. And I know the FDA also really tries to take care of not having monopolies, but with the consolidation of businesses, at the end, you end up having only few sellers of some unit operations. And also that increases the disposable cost pressure. If it is, there are less competition, then prices can rise, as well as the problem of putting all your eggs in one basket, the dependency of having just one supplier for absolutely everything. I tell you, like, some of my clients, they raise these concerns to us on what's going to happen with all this one. So the other problem is also design standardization. It's very common that the dichotomy between manual and automated assemblies and in the vendor shops, every end user really likes to provide standardized, tailor assemblies. Those ones need to be manually assembled, hence taking longer lead time, versus an automated one, like a cookie cutter, that would be much faster. And then another huge problem, open issue on how the supply chain robustness goes, is on the testing and standardization. We don't have that much testing and standardization right now, and that can be a problem because depending on where you get your tubings from, you might have some materials that are cytotoxic, like the biophosphate I'm calling there, which it kills cells, especially higher temperatures, and as well as with leachables and extractables, the testing is not the same. It's not apples to apples between one vendor and the other. So how can you rely on, I don't buy it from you today because you're out of inventory, and I bought it to somebody else? How can I make sure that it's apples to my cell line? Well, I know that there's a lot of people, and I'll touch on that later, that especially ISMVP, for instance, they are, or we are, I should say, working on standardizing testings for the industry to make sure that everyone complies the same way on this test. The same way that there is standard test for CAP and SAP and the diaphragm on a valve, for instance, openings and the cycles and whatnot, trying to do the same thing with single use. One interesting one is validating the film, the material of construction of the bags. Not all the materials are equal, and some companies, they just validate the layer that contacts the product versus others that they do the entire material. And there's a risk in there because there can be a multi-layer migration between the outer layers to the inner layers of the bags. And some suppliers do not disclose all the material that they use because it's proprietary information. So that all creates nebulous areas where there is room for improvement. Okay, so not knowing the supply chain robustness that we have, or the weak point of it, I must say, then okay, do we have open sources for components that we can get them from when the robustness is weak? Well, so to me, the current conundrum on the industry is that single-use technology was brought here to bring flexibility to the industry. But at the end, what is also happening is getting the industry captive, because you do an investment that is, the hardware is a one-time investment. Now, where you are handcuffed or captive is on the disposables. Once you buy the hardware, you gotta keep buying the same disposable over and over and over. There is no such a thing of I'm going to the competition. So that's why, like, well, you better be happily ever after, because uh, you know there's nothing else you can do. If you want to go to a competitor, you better buy the hardware from the competitor. And that's why one of the things that we always say is that, well, let's make sure that, because the suppliers, they keep innovating nonstop. So it's important to get technical quality and supply agreements with those suppliers, just to make sure that the lines that you're buying from them, they're going to keep being manufactured, and they're going to be keeping with the same material of construction, that you don't have to revalidate the processes. So that's very important. Another one is, okay, the communication architecture on the different pieces of equipment that you buy. Can they talk to each other? Is it an open architecture? And that is very important for integration. One example that I like is Repligen. Repligen was the first one creating ATFs. So hence, they were like, well, we don't make bioreactors. We better make it work with absolutely every bioreactor. That way we can talk to everyone. Well, now in the past 2 years or so, several other competitors have come out with ATFs, and these ATFs suppliers, they also have bioreactors. So it needs to be, what is the business model I'm going to do? I'm going to do an ATF that only works with my bioreactor, or I'm going to let the always use Repligen bioreactor now to play with my bioreactor again. So those are big questions that suppliers are asking themselves on what's the best business model. So in the different areas of single-use components, you have the typical ones. Well, sums, everybody uses them, right? Here's the problem: they are all patented designs, and they have completely different geometry. Maybe it's top or bottom entry of the agitator. The impeller type might be different. You might have baffles or do not have baffles, and then what happens is, can I get a single-use sum, a disposable, from some competitor? No, you couldn't, because of those reasons. And how are you gonna couple the motor? They have different, the motor types, and the female and male part, they are not universal. So there is no really flexibility. There is one vendor that I know, supplier on SAMs, that allows on their own systems some sort of flexibility, but it takes, like, they have a standard bags. It takes them almost a year to get them to be customized. And then, well, filters and tube sets, those are the best part, I should say, because you really mix and match. But as I was saying before as well, there's also concerns on leachables, extractables, and so on. Bag holders is a very interesting one. I'll touch later on a little bit more, because, okay, what you can do is you can have a holder that is 1,000 liters and put a 1,000-liter bag, or you don't need that much. You can go down to a 500-liter bag. That's common to do, but can you put a competitor bag in there? I don't think so. So there's a lot of custom systems out there, pretty much the entire market. And it makes sense when you're an infant industry, because you're trying as you go and you're tailoring and getting patents right and left. But that way you also create a wall, and a wall works both ways. You don't let competitors come in into the facility that you're entrenched on, but and the facility that they are entrenched on, good luck getting into. So so I think the industry is going to be driving and is driving more towards breaking those walls and letting competitors to actually compete. And one example I was putting here is the fiasco in my mind of single-use stainless steel no, sorry, stainless steel piping between row A, B, and C. In the US, we typically use row C or ASME standards, and in Europe they use row A and B. So a lot of times it happens that when you are building, let's say, a facility in the US and you're buying some equipment, let's say fillers, because it's typical to buy them in Europe, and you get them into the country. Well, if you haven't discussed, they do row A or row B, and you have a dumb phase when you put on your facility and you're not able to couple it to connect it to your rest of your facility because the IDOD of your piping, it doesn't match. So it creates this bump in there that you need to work on to make sure that they handshake properly, and we should try to avoid that on single use. So as I was saying, there's a lot of customization on tube sets. And I was being generous here saying that 50% of vendor businesses are customized. In fact, I was talking yesterday to some renowned vendor of tube sets, and he was telling me that actually the 90% of what they do is customized. And that creates a bigger problem also in robustness of the supply chain, because that you spend more time recreating that, and also in creating your own facilities, because you need to reinvent the wheel every single time you are doing customization of the tube sets. So one thing that is becoming very popular nowadays is mapping out the entire process. Once you've done your detailed design and you have a clear idea of your PNADs, is mapping them down in a detail as you would do with the stainless steel that you end up doing isometric with every elbow and every little bitty thing. And from there is that your starting point for tube sets. And of course, when you're done the project, or I guess companies like mine, when we're done with the project, giving this to the end user to own it, because this needs to be a live document. I had last year I was working in a project for Lonza, and I was very, very impressed because they have a very, I call it Lego oriented way of doing single use tubing. And they have a tremendous library of rules on what things can you do and can you not do a single use in order to limit the absolute myriad of different configurations you can do. So for instance, instead of having every possible length of a tubing under the sky, they say, well, guess what? You're gonna get 1, 3, or 5 meters. And if you need more, well, you play with those Lego units and you keep coupling up and down. And if you need 2 meters, well, you get 1 and 1 or a 3-1. So, and that really limits a lot the extra space you require in your warehouse. When you play with little units that you can do your Lego construction with, you don't require that much space to put anything of the little tailored customization of every single unit operation. And it's also easier for an operator, because you don't have to be finding the material number of this little bitty thing plus this other bitty thing. You just go and say, okay, generic 1 meter, generic 3 meters, and generic white tube branch, and this and that. So that makes it very easier. And you just plan a little bit for redundancy. Get a little bit extra of each in case something fails, in case you calculate it wrong and you need a little bit of extra extension, and you're good to go. And then on top of that, something recommended and actually getting more and more common is standardize your design between different facilities that the same end user has. That way, if you fall short on your supply, you can rely on them to ship it from Puerto Rico or wherever the other facility is. Then, as well as lining up several suppliers, if one fails you because whatever reason, you have backup plans, and those backup plans need to be set up way in advance to be ready from the get-go when you find the issue. As well as being open to any competitor, really, for let's say Pandotech versus Zilog. If you qualify both ahead of time, you can go with the Pandotech or the Zilog one. Okay. So this is a random PNAD that I picked up from a random design CRB. Pick any of your designs, really. So you have here a mixer going into a bag. Probably this is a media prep one. So what one would do, or what CRB and many of our competitors do as well, is, well, okay, let's make in units, as I said with the Lego, let's make a unit, one for the bag, of course, with this tubing, one for the transfer line extension, maybe an independent one just for the pump one, maybe another independent one for the Pendotech, and another one for the receiving holder. And then you map it that way, and then you can create tube sets that give you a real roadmap of what you're trying to accomplish. You break it into units, and you can share that with your suppliers and have it on their library to go boom, 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 just go supply that. And then, of course, I'm saying break it as much in units as possible. For instance, you don't have really to put a vent filter on the sum. You can do just a unit of a vent filter and a unit of the sum, because not all your sums will have a vent filter. And that way you can rely on your warehouse to be smaller. Um, and then, of course, every material has to have its own, it needs to be a very detailed BOM, bill of materials, and very detailed material number on your library to make sure that you have all the components. So, and then here's an example of one of my projects last year, actually. This is one that we did for a CDMO. Here you see the bill of materials for course, but also we color code depending on the type of material that it is, if it's C-Flex or if it's reinforced silicone or whatever ends up being, as well, of course, of showing the different types of connectors as well as pinch valves and IDs, ODs, and lengths. So what are the potential solutions to the open issues that we see with single-use components? Well, to me, one of the big ones is, okay, my supplier just told me I cannot get my bags on time. So where on earth am I gonna get all my SAMs, my subs, and my tube sets? Because they just say, sorry, I cannot help you. I mean, what are you gonna do? Well, there are several things that are happening right now. One, the patents, they are not forever. And in some of the big players, they're about to expire. Hence, anybody will be able to copy them. So that opens more the market for competition in there. Additionally, one thing that I haven't seen done, but I think it could be a potential good solution. Of course, the supplier wants you to buy their single-use set because that's how they make money. And that's great. But what happens when you cannot get it from them? Well, my thinking is, well, just sell the right to another company to manufacture your sets, but they can only sell them at a fatty royalty, and that way the end user is not inclined to buy from them, but from the IP supplier. But if there is any bump on the road, they can always go to this Plan B supplier to not get not being able to manufacture. And then bud holders is always something that amazes me because there's nothing too special about them. Yet everybody has different designs with footprints, sizes, different connectors, number of connectors, top or bottom or the front. And why, if it's just a bag for holding up liquid? Can we all align on something? I had a client in Europe that was buying Alpac um, holders, and they don't make bags, but they wanted to have the capability to do to use any possible bag. Well, it was impossible to get bags of the main suppliers to all fit in there. So it took like a year of negotiation with all of them to say, can you design me? I have tons of bags to buy from you, but can you design me one that is not fit in the Alpaca? Because I want your bag and your bag and your bag to fit in here. And it was accomplished, but it took got an effort. Okay. So here's the thing is, we need to align on a design that works, because when some wrong turn happens in the industry, then you get stuck and you cannot manufacture, and you don't have the flexibility that you were promised. So kind of is like is a crying out loud there for aligning on designs as much as we can. And one of the things that I wanted to raise, at the end of the day, this is a boat. Every manufacturing facility, either every supplier of yours succeeds, or as a whole we all fail, because you're not gonna, if I cannot get a TFF tube set, well, it doesn't matter that I have a Chrome one. And the Chrome guy that was telling me that the Chrome said, it won't be happy either, because if I cannot produce batches, I don't need more of your Chrome tube sets either. So in this boat we're all together, and we need to make it a way that we need to strengthen that the supply robustness, and probably doing some open sourcing. And and on that regard, it's in ours and in all of us benefit. There are some changes in the industry that need to happen. We have a lot of proprietary disposables. The tube sets, even if they say, well, it's the silicone one, sure, but every silicone and thermoplastic elastomeric tubing that are manufactured, they are numerous proprietary formulations. And then what happens is that then they have different extractable profiles and other properties. So that makes it difficult to just be swapping from one to the next. And then the interconnectivity between them. Um, we we need to drive through some sort of a standardization to make sure that everything connects properly. An example that I really like is the Code 7 cartridges on the filters that now absolutely everybody uses on the industry. Well, it was, I'm sure many people remember, it wasn't always like that. It used to be several different bingo card of numbers for codes on the cartridges. And at one point, ASMVP in this particular case get together with the industry and users and suppliers and say, well, look, this is not possible. We cannot work this way. And then kind of push and enforce on their standards the code 7. So you drove the industry to the 226 standard code 7 that we have right now. And honestly, I see something similar, whoever the driver is, going to happen with the connectors between aseptic connectors between the different skids. Because tri-clamps, in a way, we already went to that. Pretty much everything is standardized to 3/4 or 1.5 inch tri-clamp for all single use. But the connectors, they are aseptic ones. They are all over the place. So and that makes it hard to connect. And I think this is just how I see it going. I think that the genderless ones will end up taking over the industry because it's much easier. Again, warehouse, you don't have to do a warehouse spot for the male and for the female. You just have the genderless one and you're good to go. And personally, what I see, the septic quick is the one that I see most happening, but we'll see what happens there. Same thing with the mixers on the sums. If you all have a levitating mixer for processing, what good does it do to anybody to do proprietary or different coupling, male female, between the bag and the motor for the different levitating agitators? Just to screw me over. I mean, it's not because of that, but it's like you're screwing me over, right? I cannot get a different guy to provide me this one. Right now, in the next book of ASMVP coming out in January, we just solved the same problem that we were having with the agitators and stainless steel tanks because the flange sizing was all over the place. So it's not easy replaceable. So we're just making a standard that everybody uses the same type of flanges and coupling for the agitator. I totally see this happening the same way on the industry. This is a younger industry, so we need to push and have an open discussion on that. But I do believe that this is up and coming. And there are several forums that the suppliers, end users, and consultants like us, we're getting together to really have an open discussion on how can we make this better. In my experience, the three biggest players right now, I'm sure there are more, I just haven't met them, let's say, BPOG or Bioforum, which is more oriented to end users talking to each other. Of course, there's representation of suppliers and consultants as well, but it's heavily involved of end user. ASMVP, which is more, again, the three are represented there, but it's more heavily involved on supplier and consultant. And the Bioprocess Collaboration Center, the BCC. That one I'm not sure if it's for profit. Is Thermo Fisher sponsored them, but they also doing a phenomenal job. ASMVP just started they're doubling up. They are expanding the guidelines, the standards to include a lot of single-use stock, and I think that's going to be a huge driver to standardize, to have real talks. Like for instance, it doesn't make any sense to have 20 different sizes IDOD of tubings. Typically, I mean, it seems like in the past years we are standardizing more and more in 5 different sizes, but there is still a lot of outlier sizes out there that hopefully we can get out of the way. So as I was saying, SNEP is also creating standards for single use. I think it's really greatly helpful. BPOG, they did come out with a user toolkit. I think it was last year, really just same way. It was a open heart-to-heart conversation between supplier and user. Okay, how can we make this work better? How can we serve you as a supplier better? And what is really your constraint? What is it that you need from us? And we'll try to help. So really, the industry in my mind, is truly coming together to solve these problems. There's a lot of way to go, but I do think we are going in the right direction, embracing innovation and going to standardization. So that is pretty much all what I wanted to cover on single-use components. I was speeding a little bit because I thought I wouldn't make it in 1 hour. Maybe I am. We'll see. So the last part that I wanted to talk about is the sustainability, and more precisely in solid waste. So every facility has a bunch of liquid and solid waste, and everybody for years we've talked about liquid waste. I didn't feel like putting time on that on this presentation for a couple of reasons. Well, there are two types of liquid waste typically: the liquid process waste, and that one there is not super much you can do about, because it's dictated by the process that comes to you from R&D. And then there is the liquid support ways, such as Wi-Fi's or CIPs or condensates. And there's always a talk about it, right? What can I reduce my final rinse on CIP for pre-rinse, or can I use the reclaim Wi-Fi for boilers, or do a water only CIP? So there's already talks on that. But what I haven't seen many talks so far on, and I think this is catching up actually, is in solid waste for the disposables. And I do believe that now what is a headache, it can become also a win-win battleground for everyone. So the problem that I've seen, especially somehow I see it most on 2020, is there's been a huge boom in the industry. Cell and gene therapy has been up and coming for years. Last year was tremendous. And so a lot of new companies coming with cell and gene therapy. COVID-19, as I was explaining before, has also exacerbated the requirement for new facilities, bigger, expanding. And then one very interesting thing that I've seen is that biotech seems to me that is now the new real estate investment. Companies don't buy now, or not only buy now buildings for investment, for apartments and for offices, but I'm seeing very much investment companies buying warehouses, parking lots, and then just hiring companies saying, look, I have no clue what cell and gene therapy is, but I want you to design for me a cell and gene therapy facility. I want flexibility 100% for cells and for genes, whatever that means. And I'm gonna have several suites for different clients, and I will rent them out. So go ahead and do it for me. So those three aspects have been the factor that really have made a boom in the industry on more disposables being used. On top of that, we have now more flexibility than ever, is more important than ever, because we have very tailored medicine, very batches, less batches, and with the smaller amounts for a more tailored clientele, tailored patient. So that requires a faster turnaround of single-use disposables. Now, last year, with Gia and Alpha Laval, they both came out with phenomenal single-use centrifuges, which was the last piece that we didn't have on single use for production. So that also is going to push more into single use facilities. They are still a little bit low in LPMs, but I'm pretty sure they are working on models with higher throughput. And so this is catching in there. And then we cannot forget that cell and gene is still in its infancy. Everything is single use, of course, but also is very tailored. You have designed one specific unit operation however you thought it was best, without really always looking around on how do you connect with the other things. So that creates also a little bit of headache and a little bit more extra disposables usage that that need to be taken into account. So what happens is we have more plants, more throughput required, and more disposables. And that equation, what it really creates is, what the heck do I do with all that solid waste that I created? I don't have anywhere to put it. So what do I do with it? Well, historically, your options have been landfill, has been the main one, right? It's low cost. But at the same time, it traps the water on the plastic bags that you don't recover to the atmosphere. So that's the environment. The Earth is not happy about it. And the second option has been really incineration. Well, the cool thing is the water goes back to the atmosphere, so that's good. But you also do release some noxious fumes to the atmosphere. And what is funny with the Kyoto Agreement that everybody in the world has, at the end of the day, is it really limiting emissions? I'm not sure. I mean, countries like Western countries like Europe or the US, what you just do is buy the rights from Africa or whatever that they don't use that many, and you just shift where the pollution goes. So it's not the cleanest either. You do generate some energy on a waste to energy model, and they're typically upside. They no, you don't always they have incineration plants nearby, and that's why one would rely on landfills. Now the up and coming one really is the is recycling, and it's just giving a new purpose to the solid waste that you gather in your facility that you really have no use for, and uh, and the overall carbon footprint is completely reduced. So when we talk about solid waste, what do we really talk about? Well, all the tubing sets, the equipment bags, the filter capsules, the cover up bags, the PPE, absolutely all these plastics, um, the- all of those are the what are we talking about on solid waste. And when you are trying to understand how much do you produce and what can you do with it, you gotta map it, and you need to know, well, what is the initial content of the different plastics that I'm using? Is it hazardous material? What is my BSL level in the facility? And BSL 3, you require autoclaves. BSL 2 is a hit or miss. Sometimes NIH recommends it. Not everybody puts it in there. And then you have the extra challenge that not every plastic is the same type. And you cannot recycle all of them, and you need to separate them. It's not the same thing, polymeric ones the non-polymeric ones. And then also the bags, they have magnets. That's not plastic. What are you gonna do with that? How can I'm gonna get a knife and tear up that bag to get the magnet out and just dispose it somewhere else? I don't think so. So how can you do with that? You can do separation by weight, and in some of the facilities they do that, but it's also a little bit of cumbersome. So one of the things you do is map how much space you need. And that's where really you care about the mapping that you did with your single-use tubing, that and a schedule. We typically at CRB we use Schedule Pro, where scheduling of how many batches you guys have, and knowing, okay, how much garbage I accumulate every day. Once you know that, you know how much volume they occupy, how much do they weigh, and then that way you can know how much bins of garbage do I generate and what space do I need in my facility versus do I ship it out somewhere. So there is an analysis in there where the tube sets really play a key role. And then is the decision of, okay, do I treat it in the facility a little bit or do I ship it somewhere? Well, you're not always able to ship it somewhere due to lack of incineration facilities or recycling anyway nearby you. So there are these up and coming is these machines that they shred and sterilize. So they would be shredding your biohazardous materials and then sterilize them, and then you can ship them out of there. Um, so those machines, what are the good things about them? Well, they don't occupy much space, or much less than all the autoclaves or the staging all those bins. You can handle liquid and solid waste. You don't have to separate that either. They can steam sterilize versus having to red bag and sell it to somebody that can hopefully sterilize it for you for some money, fat money there, and so you can do it all on site. And then also the autoclaves. One thing that consultants we always need to take into account is that you have to reinforce floors typically of how heavy they are, and then that material that you shred and sterilize, a lot of times you are able to repurpose it. So these machines have been in the hospital industry for many years now, but they are just coming into the biotech industry. So this is one of few examples. of the machine, where you have on the top, you have an opening where you dump your stuff, your solids waste. Then on the middle, you can see that there is a grinder in there. On the bottom, you do some sterilization, and then you open it up to a dumpster and you can ship it out. You can do it all in one level. You can do it in several levels, one in the warehouse, the other one in where the autoclave would have been. They are, as I was saying, different models, smaller, bigger, different vendors, European, American. So they are all getting their feet wet on this on the biotech market once they've already definitely conquered the hospital market. And really how it works, as I was saying, is you load them, you shred them, you do some heat up, the dwell sterilization, then you cool it down. You also drain the liquid that you have in there from the bags, the leftover 10% or whatever ends up being, and then you unload it on a dumpster. And again, lather, rinse, repeat, lather, rinse, repeat, and keep going. And it's not that it's kind of fast. It doesn't take that much time, so it reduces a lot your warehouse staging for waste. Um, and then what do you do then with magnets? Well, believe it or not, they can smash those magnets pretty well too. So you can get rid of them. Now, here's the thing. If you are having magnets there, then you have a mix of magnets and plastic, pieces of magnets and plastic. The recycling now gets into a different topic and gets more difficult. But you can also, put in bags like, okay, I'm going to put my PPE in here only. Or I'm going to put in here, yes, in this other dumpster, I'm going to put only my sums. And you end up having, well, from a big dumpster of every kind of plastic to little bitty pieces as shredded. And the cool thing about it as well is that, as I was saying, there's a reincarnation for everything here. You can repurpose it on something else, and you can, as long as your it's polyolefins, most of your garbage, 90% typically, you can recycle it on any sort of energy, and you can sell it as a byproduct of your recycling. And I know that there are some companies, Sartorius is one of them, that they are working. The problem here is that, as I was saying, only 90%, you only allow for 10% of the plastic not being a polyolefin. So there are companies, Sartorius, trying to create bags that get rid of the silicone tail of tubing in and out, and potentially make it something different. That way the entire bag is actually recyclable. And there are other types of ways of recycling, really. There are companies that what they do, they create syngas. Either they can create, as in the picture above, you can put it on your parking lot or in your warehouse, or they can do it on their own facility, where they create some syngas from unsorted plastics that they destroy. And then other companies that they actually just get with you for several months, and they assess the type of garbage that you have of plastics and see what is the best treatment for your plastic, and they tailor for you a treatment option that can install on your facility, not a huge footprint, to treat it on site. um, and then there is talk about also shipping it, the garbage, to be the red bags, to be gamma radiated either on site, but that might be a big of a footprint, or going to some other companies. So, and where do you put that waste? Well, the reincarnation, where does it go? You can create plastic pallets. You can create plastic lumbers, benches, building blocks. They are different components, and they different. Some of them do one or the other, and it always, of course, depends on the mixture of the plastic that you have. But really, and you get money out of it. It's not much, but you're losing money right now, uh, paying somebody to take your garbage out, and here you're making a little bit of money, or maybe calling it even. So, and then there's other ways that you can do the recycling. Well, what happens when you have expired tube sets? Okay, clearly you cannot use them in pre-production, but what about in a phase 1 or phase 2 study, R&Ds, or engineering runs on the OQs? So that way you don't, they're expensive, so you would reuse them that way. And you can even sell them as I was saying, there's some supplier that they sell expired ones for this kind of activities. So that also becomes a win-win. Um, in my mind, as far as I know, the two big players really on pushing the industry to be more sustainable is one that I'm sure some of you have heard before, is the Triumvirate Recycling Program, which is an alliance, let's say, from two different private entities trying to work on how can we make single use much more sustainable. And the other one is the Bioprocess System Alliance. That one is for profit, which is an international industry association for really just mapping where we are recycling and proposing new ideas and connecting companies with other recycling entities. And then I guess the question that lays is, why would you do it? Well, reality is most people didn't care at all about recycling up until, I mean, 2 3 years ago, I think. But now there's been a huge shift on purposing and recycling, and one of the reasons, but not the main one, is really okay. You might have higher initial capital cost investing on recycling equipment, but at the end of the day, depending on the technology you pick, you recoup that money in few years. And as I was saying, you may turn it on for profit if you're able to repurpose the material in some syngas or some sort of oil or lumberjack. So and then you can always do it later. You don't have to do it right away, as long as you leave a space on your warehouse for future expansion on recycling capabilities. Um, then you're good to do it later. So there is no reason to, I'm sure it's the first thing that goes value engineer, but it can be done at a later stage when there's more money to invest on recycling. And then also one is the corporate social responsibility. There's a new one, and that is new because it didn't used to be there. Big companies being that interested in this, but it has, to me, that has shifted a lot because of the new type of employee. Now people are really, they don't, this isn't a 9 to 5 anymore. The companies are a tremendous intrinsic part of your life where you want to be engaged and be proud of who you work for. And due to that, you demand your company to do the right thing, and you demand your company to do as much recycling as they can. Not only that, but also shareholders on these publicly traded companies, they demand it as well. Last year, there were several shareholder litigations for lack of recycling, actually. And the company shareholders, the KPI of profit is not the only one anymore. There is a myriad of KPIs in there, and one of them is sustainability. And in the past 5 years, I don't think more than that, they've created on the stock market green index funds where you buy for people that don't want to invest tailor investment, they do funds. They want to be socially responsible, only invest on companies that they know they're doing good for Earth. So all those things really shift the paradigm towards recycling. And then the corporate image. Everyone, especially public institutions such as hospitals and universities, they are leaning towards labs. They are leaning towards the LEED certification because that's the one way to get money from the government as a form of grants. And then social media trends, they can destroy your corporate image or raise it up to the sky. And then company rankings. It's the same thing with when you go to a restaurant, you are ranking you don't go to a restaurant with a 1 star just because people were ranking it. And that happens on the consumption of products as well. And there's increasing global competition where if he's doing it in a compelling way, the manufacturing, and you're not, maybe I go with them, or it's cheaper because their cost of manufacturing is lower due to recycling. And lastly, um, yeah, and with increasing competition, yes, as I was saying, you need to be up to your game. So that's pretty much all that I wanted to cover today. I'm surprised I had time. I was speaking a lot. Hopefully, my thick accent didn't prevent you from understanding it. And then I was going to, let you guys ask any questions, or even if you have any experience or bit of knowledge that you would like to share to the room, because what I showed in here is really my experience of what I've encountered, but I am sure there's other societies and other technologies that are out there that I or CRB might not be aware of that might be interesting for the broader group.
Yeah, thank you so much, Alejandro. That
Of
was
course.
really great, insightful presentation. We've definitely got some questions over there for you. So
Okay.
for our audience, you all should now see the Pigeonhole screen. As a reminder, if you click into the chat box, you can see the link with the code to get into the live Pigeonhole chat, so you can submit your own question. You can even tack a comment onto an existing question. We've got one of those which has done that, and you can vote for various questions that you would like to have answered. And so that's how I'm going to prioritize asking questions to Alejandro. We're running this for another 30 minutes. So we'll do our best to work through all of the questions. If there are any unanswered questions that we're not able to get to due to time, we will document those. Alejandro will take some time to type up a thoughtful answer, and we will send that out to the attendees along with the link to the recording of this session.
So I type the answer, or
yeah, well, no, you can just speak to the answer live on screen. Those are just the questions that if we don't have time to get to them.
Sure.
So, all right, so let's just jump right in. So our top voted question, got 3 votes so far. Would it be preferred to have single-use sensors integrated into the bag, or to have reusable sensors that can adapt to the bag or the flow path? What are your thoughts on that?
So I think it's a phenomenal question, because I've been dealing exactly with this problem with one of my clients and right now. And in my mind, it's better to not have the single-use sensor integrated with the bag. And the reason to say that is, as I was saying with the Lego concept, having small units, because you might be buying a bag from a vendor, but you want to have from your tech transfer or your R&D, you want to have a RTD, well, whatever probe it is that you're putting in from a different one. So in my mind, you really want to mix and match. The problem that you encounter is that not every bag allows for the flexibility of putting any probe that you want, due to the different lengths or connections, or even single-use stainless steel. Not every bag supplier allows you to put a stainless steel probes on there. So that kills a little bit of flexibility. So I do think it's better to be able to be not integrated, but understanding that not every single-use user uses single-use probes, having the capacity to also use the typical sleeve and stainless steel probe that you put in an autoclave. And for the flow paths, I also do believe that one is better off not having them integrated. That way, as I was saying, to me, the biggest players in the world on this probably Zilog and Pendotech. And if you can plan for both, you do, for instance, if you have, as I was saying, 1, 3, and 5 meter length extensions, well, when you have an instrumentation, maybe you create another one of a 1/2 meter extension, and that way you have that unit where you can plug it and play wherever you deem necessary. But of course, as long as you have validated ahead of time 2 or 3 different suppliers. So yeah, I think we're better off not having them integrated.
Okay, great, thank you. We will move on to the next question. So we got several with 1 vote each, so I'll just work my way through those. So the next question has to do with solid use waste recycling methods. So the person is asking, solid use waste recycling methods require separation and sorting of components by material of construction by the end user. Are end users ready to do that? And are there any tools available that they can deploy to help do that?
That's a great question. And are the end users ready to do that? Probably not. Not yet. But where does it put you when you are not ready to do that? It doesn't make, okay, oh, well, I cannot do it. I'm going to go back to the good old days of landfill and incineration. It really puts you on, okay, well, at a barely minimum, I can try to recycle, meaning, for instance, when I was saying about the shredding, put it all in a bag and potentially pay a offsite facility that they would be sorting for you. Or potentially, the way you can do it as well is just shipping all your waste, solid waste, to a centralized third-party facility where they do the sorting for you, as I was saying, with by weight and by different type of separations. But additionally, there are ways to do it on your facility. For instance, having different waste bins, where in a waste bin you put all your HTPE bottles or your and your cartridges, single-use capsules of filters, and those ones you put them all in one, and that can be recycled. Or your PPE all in one, so you can do, like we do on the houses with the different garbage bins for separation. Yes, that can be done, but it's true we are not fully there yet. And I think suppliers recognize that of single-use equipment, and and they are working towards a solution for that as well.
Great, thank you. So let's move on to the next question. So you had talked about dealing with the expiry of bags at the beginning of the talk, and you proposed as a solution, hey, as expiry is closing in on these bags, there's a potentially that you could offer a discount, but as an alternative, could there be a market for single-use suppliers to offer expiry extension as an added service? So for example, ship the expired bag back to the supplier re-irradiates, extends the expiry, and then sends the bag back to the user. And the comment that we had added an additional consideration onto that, asking, would we also have to consider material, effect on material quality? Would we have to reevaluate leachables and et cetera? So I don't know if you've evaluated any models that would incorporate.
I think this is I do think this will happen, where in the same way, it's going to be a both way street, I believe. In the same way that a supplier, and not many are doing it, but I think more will, sells you close to expiration bags knowingly, and every party knows about it, and then you just only use it for certain activities that they are not actual manufacturing product. I think the same way may happen, where in the warehouse you got expiration of X bags and tube sets, you send it back, and then you get it all irradiated and good. But the problem is, as the other commentator is saying, you would need to revalidate it for the leachables, extractables, and particulates. So with that said, I believe that the same market would be used for these ones, which is OQs and phase ones, phase two R&D stuff. So for all those activities where you don't have to demonstrate any of the leachables, extractables, and other detrimentals for the product, I think for that you can use it. Yeah, as I was saying, there is some companies talking about adding capability of gamma irradiation for leachable. It could go both ways, either to gamma irradiate your waste to make it non-biohazardous, but also to irradiate your unused bag. At the end of the day, when you do gamma radiation, it's in a container, and there's no way what have you put through there before. So yes, I do think that will happen.
Okay, great, thank you. So moving on to the next question. So I think a lot of what you've talked about are more market-based solutions, companies looking where they can make a profit, or at least reduce the loss in dealing with these. But what about regulatory solutions? I mean, do you envision any regulatory solutions coming into play? For example, as you talked about supply chain issues, might FDA get concerned about supply chain robustness, foresee an impact to drug supply, and step in and mandate some additional solutions?
I really would hope, and I think this past year has been an eye opener for everyone. And even in Operation Warp Speed, the government has seen as well that how tight the market is, because it's been, even with Operation Warp Speed, it's been so hard to get single-use tubing sets. I was doing one of the COVID vaccines last year, and even with all the publicity that this project got, and everybody's eyes was on this project, it was so hard to get the tube sets for certain unit operations. And I think that everybody has been able, from different types of the sides of the table, have been able to see that. And I think that something will be done. Same thing with the monopoly, right? We've seen some mergers where has been enforced to divest from certain unit operations in order to avoid monopoly, and also with sustainability, it was also instaurated the American Business Act on climate pledge, I think by Obama a few years ago, where all these big players are also committing and signing on plans of quantifiable plans for targets on sustainability. So I do think I wouldn't be surprised if FDA steps up and says, okay, we got to do something here, or maybe and the societies as ISP or BPOC or and ASMVP, they all talk to each other, and they are members actually that double deep on different forums and align, and the FDA also listens to the societies and is very welcoming to their input. So I do think that will happen. That it will be good, and I think potentially yes, the FDA can step in.
Okay, yeah, interesting. So we'll see what happens with that. Thank you. So moving into a little bit of the validation realm. So next question is asking about that. So understanding some of the issues with validation. Are end users willing and able to support new suppliers and products entering the market in order to ease that strain on the supply chain?
So that's funny because I was in a meeting last week actually on this topic for ASMVP. We were closing the year for the new edition, and this is one of the things that we were talking about. And I think that will have to happen. That it's going to be as any design, we end up having a handshake and an agreement and understanding between the different parties involved on making it happen. Same thing is going to happen with these tube sets and the validation. I do believe that a standard set of tests on how to implement those tests will be created, and there will be also validation how to do it will be also called out, and in the design of those everybody will be voiced and input their opinion. The same way that everybody knows, or as a rule of thumb, you do 5 feet per second on a line to clean it, a stainless line to clean it. The same way we will get into how many millimeters of the bag you're required to disclose the material on, and we believe that there might be extractables coming out of there, or what type of solvent do you require to use for your extractable analysis. So yes, I do believe that every party is already getting involved, and specific clients will use these standards to agree with the end supplier on how to validate them. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So next question. So single-use end users recognize the risk of proprietary standards or are looking for those open source solutions. What about the vendors? Are they listening and willing to cooperate? I think you had mentioned in the ASME BPE group, there is certainly vendor representation in there. Where do vendors stand on this?
Yeah, and so in BPOC, they're very well represented in BPOC as well. I don't think, I'm not trying to paint at all the supplier as the evil to make fall. No, I do believe the supplier they really acknowledge what's the problem in here too, and they are trying to work for a solution. Their voice are raised on several forums, and they are working on them. And I'll say, as I was saying before, I was talking just yesterday with some tube set manufacturer, and I posed the question to him, and I was a little bit surprised. He was telling me that they are now even doing due to the huge bottleneck on those tube sets, they are demanded by some end users to do tube sets for some specific TFFs or chrome kits, where you typically will go to your supplier to buy them. So they do a knockoff, let's say, that it will serve until you can get the real one. Of course, if it doesn't work, you cannot blame anybody because you didn't go to the right route. But what other option you have left? So I do think they are listening. I do think there's a lot of movement behind the curtains, and I do think we're gonna get. We are still very young on single use. It's not they always say, oh, single use is the future. Well, it's truly the present, right? But even being the present, there's a lot of pains that we haven't learned through yet, that we are all as an industry trying to get together and see what can we do better. Now, it's always a heartburn and a problem because when you standardize, you also may open the bag of your own captive clients to go to somebody else. So potentially you might lose profit that way, but potentially not, because then what happens is you don't rely as much on your IP, which also until it lasts, but you rely on your constant innovation, on your constant know-how to. So yes, I do believe suppliers are part of the solution, and I do believe they are aware of the problems, and yes, they are actively collaborating on making it better.
Great. Well, that's good to hear. Sounds like everybody is aware of the issues and is working together. So we'll move into our last couple of questions here. So can you speak to the recent ISPE guideline for single use? Maybe share some of your thoughts on that, and then when do you see the industry beginning to adopt those requirements or guidelines?
So I have to admit I cannot say much on this one because I'm not as familiar with the ISP guideline for single use. I've been more cooperating on the standards for the ASMVP than the ISP ones. So unfortunately, on that question, I'm not. I don't have much input to give.
All right. Yeah. No worries. I appreciate.
I can make something up if you want me
Oh,
to.
sure. No. It's all good. It's all good. All right. I think we've got one question left, and we'll talk about this one. So, how can you find and qualify consumable suppliers that will work with these multiple hardware manufacturers? So it sounds like, there is some of this emerging open source environment, which is just coming out. So how can end users start to find some of those suppliers that are beginning to adopt these open source principles?
Yeah, that's a tough one, huh? So yes, when one is planning their single use facilities, you typically rely on try to put a business plan in place with 2 or 3 different suppliers. And historically, you just go, to they are like out there, like let's say 5 big players. Well, you go to 2 or 3 big players and you set it that way. But later on, as I was saying, yes, there's been a lot of up and coming. So how do you find them? Well, I'll say Google. You can email me. I can give you some names. I just don't feel like disclosing because I don't want it to make it silly at any point. I'm more than happy to give you names of companies that I know of or I've worked with. But and I'll tell you another one is, to me, the reps are your best friends. I talk to my reps on different companies quite a lot because it's really symbiotic. The things that you learn from them, the things that come to the industry. So, for instance, I'll make this up. If you have something from PAL and you talk to the PAL rep, I'm pretty sure that PAL rep will have no issue to disclose a company that he knows about that they do tube sets. And those companies that make tube sets, they also do mounting all the filters and they also provide bags. So word to mouth, really, and Google search. And again, if anybody wants, I'm happy to disclose some in a private email.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. And I believe that is all of our questions. So with that, we are going to wrap up today's webinar. I want to thank you so much, Alejandro, for sharing your expertise with us today. This is incredibly insightful, so much good knowledge here. I'm just so grateful for you sharing all of your thoughts and experiences here. And I also want to thank everyone who joined today's webinar for your interest and your support of ISPE Boston Area Chapter's educational programming. You'll receive a follow-up email with a short survey. We'd love your feedback so we can continue to bring really strong technical content to the community.
And if anybody has any question or comment, I'm more than happy to answer the emails. I think
absolutely.
I put my email address there.
Yeah. Please do that if there are any additional questions or comments. You'll also receive a link to view a recording of today's webinar. So thank you again to our dedicated sponsors, DPS, ICQ Consultants, and Massey Bioservices. So on the behalf of ISPE Boston and our presenters, thank you again for joining us today and have a great rest of your day.